So good evening. This is the Housing Needham Advisory Group meeting on Thursday, January 4th, 2024. And I believe we have quorum and we have one more. So do we need to go around do we need to go around the room just to confirm that?
I think it's worth it just to introduce very quickly everyone, in case this is anyone's first meeting coming in.
So do we want to start?
I'll start. I'm Heidi Frail. I'm the co-chair of this committee and member of the select board.
I'm Natasha Spada, co-chair of this committee and member of the planning board.
Ron Ruth, appointee by the planning board.
Michael Diener, appointee of the select board.
I'm Eric Halverson with RKG Associates, the town's consultant.
Katie King, deputy town manager.
Alex Klee, assistant town planner.
Jean McKnight, member of the planning board and appointee of the planning board to this committee.
I'm Josh Levy, a member of the finance committee.
So a little bit of appointee of the planning board.
Lee Newman, the director of planning and community development. Great. And then online we have.
Yeah, Kevin Keene, COVID patient, select board member.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming today. And I think what we want to do is, I think most of the meeting will be directed by Eric. I think Emily is not joining us tonight. Is that correct? To look at the presentation materials for the community meeting and to just in general review the updated Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities compliance modeling results today. But I think, do you want to talk about the goals? I mean, the goals today are.
Yeah, we have our second public meeting coming up. I just got my postcard announcing this in the mail today. Hope everyone else has gotten theirs, or it should be coming in the next couple of days. And so we want to just make sure that we are all set with our compliance, the models that we'll be showing that will depict different ways of compliance. And then to talk about how we want to engage with the public and make sure that we have a chance to hear public comment. And we have some plans for engagement, including the survey, and we just want to talk all that through and make sure that we're all ready to make it happen.
So I think in general, we want to make sure that we review all of the scenarios that we are presenting, which are the 3 scenarios, right? And make sure that we're all in agreement. And I think that's the first goal, and the second is review the presentations. Okay, so Eric, we'll hand it over to you.
Great. So first up would be just to review one more time the 3 scenarios that we talked about at the last meeting. So we have scenario, well, I'll call 1, 3 and modified 6. So 1 is sort of that minimum. What do we need to get to the minimum? So nothing changed with that scenario from what we presented last time. It's all the same. So those results are exactly the same. Scenario 3 is kind of the modified housing plan, no GR, change in the parking. Nothing has changed with that one. Those results are exactly the same. The only thing that we did was take your feedback and working with staff and co-chairs just to change 6 to try to intensify the commercial districts a little bit more and just see how much more that gets us. So if everyone's okay, I'll sort of just quickly show you one more time the other 2 and then kind of focus on the other. So this is again, scenario 1. We're starting to clean up the maps a little bit to try to make them a little more consistent, a little bit more visible. Trying to add like points of interest, like the schools and the parks, water bodies, things that people will hopefully be able to identify with a little bit more. If there are any kind of key public landmarks, I don't often like to highlight businesses because if you highlight one, then it seems, I don't know, it seems a little weird. So if there's any public landmarks that we don't have on here, just, if you can let us know either tonight or shortly after, that'd be great. But we tried to do the schools, obviously the T-stops, the parks, water bodies, like the libraries and their town halls on there, for example, just to give people a frame of reference. Because these maps are, I'll talk about it later, but these maps are going to be what people need to look at either through the online survey or through the paper version that we're going to have available at the meeting on the 18th. So just making sure that these are clear will be important. So again, this is sort of our getting down to the minimum, the 15 dwelling units an acre for scenario 1 and 1,637 units again, this is below the 1784 because we're using the offset from the mandatory mixed use center business district, which gets us back up to the 1784. Scenario 3, again, the map. And then the results, 15.8 dwelling units.
Look at the map again, I know we saw it last week, but scenario 3, no. That's industrial. It's Avery. What is the orangey colored one, the northernmost piece of Highland Avenue?
All of the kind of darker orange are the A1s.
Oh,
Are you concerned with one of
but
them? Jean?
landmark wise, is,
At Carter Methodist.
I'm trying to,
It's heading up the fire station to, Webster's and Highland. It would be the north end.
West
or-
Street, then that's Honeywell,
That's Webster.
okay.
That's the fire station. So, is it Hamilton Highlands or?
So that does include, oh yeah, now I understand, now I got it. That includes Hamilton Highland, right there, and then the Avery across the street. But it also then extends down, to, okay, all right, thank you for, helping me to clarify that in my mind.
Along that vein, I see that black spine coming down the middle and I keep getting thrown off. Does it make sense maybe if we're talking about map and context to highlight Highland Ave from the top to the bottom?
And I'm
Yeah,
just gonna say, someone at our last meeting expressed that they were feeling like calling it the spine was not, they didn't feel it was a positive thing. I personally don't. It was never intended in that way. The spine is what holds up the body. All this, the most important stuff flows through it, but given that, I didn't wanna offend anyone, so maybe we can just make an effort to refer to this as Highland Ave.
Sure, that said, if
Yeah.
Highland Ave, where it goes through, where it cuts through the different
Yeah,
transparent
because
districts.
you lose it with the district.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
And just to second that, I think since the railroad right of way parallels Highland Avenue, on a quick look, it's often confusing as to
Yeah.
which is Highland Avenue and which is the railroad right of way.
Yeah, I have to keep reminding myself that the main line that runs down is actually the train and not
Yeah.
not Highland.
Yeah.
That's true.
Might make sense if it was in some, yes, highlighted in some way and then go down Chapel and then go down Chestnut. So people can like really see that one
The rail line.
long expanse. No, on the street.
The rail and the streets.
Yeah.
Highland to Chapel, I think, to Chestnut. Right.
Thanks.
Kevin has his hand up.
Oh, thank
Hey,
you.
yeah, thank you, Heidi. I agree about Highland Ave and the train track, and then my question is about the A1 district in the northwest overlaying Glover Meadows. I didn't know they were called Glover Meadows, but I think you're explaining yourself to be blue in the face that we're not. Is that conservation land? It looks like we're gonna put up paved paradise and put up a parking lot. So do we want to fix that?
Well, conservation land wouldn't count towards the model.
No,
Correct,
that's
but
all
it looks
zone.
like we are off West Street.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
That's,
I guess what I want to assure though is that the district lines or the
Yeah.
lines don't, you, even if it encompasses excluded land, you still can't build on that land.
is,
Right, it's just a zoning that sits on top of it.
It's just zoning. I think we could say something about it. How are these lines?
Sorry.
I mean,
That-
change
We can also change the base map. It's just the base map. Like-
You could change the board.
You could do that.
I mean, because if we can't include it anyway, to Kevin's point, like, why don't we just make that obvious that we're not doing that? Could we do that?
I just want to be clear, is Kevin talking about the area by Hillside?
Yeah, to the left.
Yes,
I think he's talking about
The orange
Yeah.
to the left on the top.
area. So above Hillside.
I wonder if it's the property line.
So the district itself, as it's drawn, has to follow parcel lines, so it does follow actual parcels.
It could be
We
one.
could change the boundary. I don't
Is
wanna do that right
gonna affect-
now,
is that
but
gonna
we could
affect
do
the
that.
model? Yeah.
It would, we'd have to rerun everything. We could simply change the base map underneath. So change it to something else so that it doesn't say Glover Meadows and we don't see those things underneath.
And I think it's good to see the things underneath. Could it be a little more transparent so you could see and say within the green, we can't? Because it's making it opaque. It feels like you're just building over it.
Yeah, because we're trying our best to highlight the zoning districts within
No,
the
I
MBTA
understand.
so that,
Okay, well, let's table this thought, because I suspect this won't be the only time we run into it. Let's table the thought. We need to make sure that we express or articulate that excluded land is excluded, even if it's shown within the borders of the district, because we can't build on it.
Can I
yeah, that
suggest
works.
outlining the districts that currently exist today in a different color or just outline pattern than the ones that are proposed to be changed? So like that A1 district, for instance, that I don't believe that's currently A1, is it?
No,
No, we're
it's much
proposing-
larger than,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
much larger than the current one.
just to give you a sense, these are some of the existing districts as drawn today without any
That's
housing
basically
plan
what's-
changes.
I think what's important is for people to understand what is proposed geographically, what's proposed to change and what's geographically staying the same.
Where are the changes, right?
Yeah.
I have a question about the purpose of tonight's meeting, the agenda for tonight's meeting. When we get into the scenario 1 and the scenario 2 that is proposed for presentation, is it our role tonight to say, well, really, let's not, let's take that off the
No,
table?
and I'm glad you brought that up. I want to just reiterate, tonight is about getting a 1, 2, and 3 option, a small, medium, and large to present to the town.
As
The
a
maps,
first draft.
yeah, as a first draft, the maps that people express preferences for will be the base that we use to say, well, not this and this, and we're gonna change this little thing here for real edits and much more intense scrutiny. But right now, we're trying to get from the town a sense of what kind of housing they want to see, how we want to use the land. Do we want to just comply with the very minimum we can do? Do we want to go big or go home and we want to house everyone and we want to do everything we can possibly do to create much more housing in Needham? Or do we want a middle ground? And I think if we don't have the time, first of all, to get too into the weeds tonight, but we also, there's no point in doing that because we haven't got that feedback yet. And I think we discussed at our last meeting that having distinct options, small, medium, and large, would be the most helpful to generate the feedback that will allow us to try and make those further decisions. I think, to your point, let's keep our eye on that, not worry, not that we're not paying attention, not that we're not coming back to it, but there are gonna be questions on each one of these maps that we have issues with, but those aren't issues for tonight. Those will be issues for after we get the majority of our feedback. Is everyone okay with that?
Yes, I'd like to give an example. The Hillside School, which is shown in scenario 2, because it was, the housing plan did say, we should consider rezoning the Hillside School. But I know that in this plan, it would have to be excluded land, because the select board and the town isn't far enough along from everything I've seen, and you as a member of the select board, you confirm that. But to take it off the table tonight, what would mean that we'd lose the opportunity to have people say, Oh, yeah, we should have housing at the Hillside School,
But even if they say that,
you know?
we can't include it as part of our map.
Well, it is included. But what I mean is,
The district is included, but parcel isn't. right?
excuse me?
You can rezone.
The district is included with the parcel in it.
Yeah, it's on scenario 2. So
Right, but
we
I-
can get, it's that orange piece
But it
way
doesn't
over to the
count.
left.
It doesn't count.
It doesn't count towards the model. Sorry, it doesn't count towards compliance.
Right.
That's
That's
all I have
right.
to say. Yeah.
That's right. But instead of saying, well, then we should just take it off, why not show it to people and get their reaction? Would they like to see housing at Hillside School? Is that the idea?
I think for me, the idea, and maybe I don't know, hey, but I think the first one is showing the minimal without it, right? And then the second one is showing that that could be a parcel, and the third one shows that it's even more. And I think that that's where we want to get the big picture. So that it is in one of the options, so that people can say, we understand that the A1 is something that we want in that area. The details of it, based on what is selected, I think, Eric, is this right? Based on what is selected, then we can focus on the details of the scope, but it's more minimal scope.
Also, if we rezone it, it's gonna be rezoned another time.
Yeah, but I think that's right, and I'm wondering if we have Eric keep going through the slides, we're gonna get to what we're proposing as the survey questions to the participants, so maybe you'll get a better,
That's a
more
good
concrete
point.
sense of what is the feedback that we're gonna get from the group. So that might answer some of the questions, because I think right now, just to clarify, options 1, 2, 3 were decided at our last meeting. This is just a report out of what they look like. So we're not changing the maps at this
Right.
point. It's what does the workshop look like? What is the feedback we're gonna be getting from the community? And what materials do we need to best communicate that? So,
And Jean, one of the things that I heard from the community in general is that they weren't able to get answers at the last meeting, and I reiterated to them, last meeting was a listening meeting. This meeting, Eric will be providing, and Emily will be providing answers. And there will be participation to get feedback. So the last one was listening, this one is feedback and answering questions, so that it's it's interactive in a different way, right?
Just for a visual, I do think it would be helpful to, if it's possible, outline districts whose boundaries are different from today's in like a dashed line, for instance. Because I think as long as we're showing maps, the most salient thing is geography.
I agree.
The housing plan has maps like that, but it does get very complicated and hard to
Yeah,
read.
I do worry that that's good.
Yeah.
There's already so much
Yeah.
on there and so many lines. I'm a little worried, I mean, I take your point, I don't think you're wrong, I'm just a little worried that it's gonna be pretty cluttered, but. All right. Eric, please.
Okay, so for scenario 6 modified the housing plan sort of plus upzoning in the commercial districts based on the feedback from before. So just to draw your attention, I know the table is very large. Not planning on showing this at the public meeting. But the kind of the big changes are really to maximum dwelling units per acre in the commercial business districts. So we bumped all those up to 50 per our last conversation. The heights are all between 4 and 5 stories, with the exception, of course, of general residence at 2.5 stories. And then the other change that we discussed last time was switching in general residence from 4 dwelling units per acre to 4 units per parcel or per lot, which, as we know, last time we modeled it, made a huge difference and bumped up the density. So those are really the big changes. It was really making sure the heights were all consistent with what we talked about, the dwelling units per acre, and making that one change in general residence from dwelling units per acre to units per lot. Again, this is the map that we discussed last time with the pretty much the inclusion of GR. And then here are the results. So when we combine everything, we get 17.7 dwelling units per acre and 5,040 units for scenario 6. And you can see the breakdown by district of which ones are sort of generating the highest unit capacity and contributing to the dwelling units per acre.
Remember trying to mind for just a second.
The biggest change from scenario 3 to scenario 6 on the map is by, and obviously including GR. But when we include GR, we also pick up a couple extra districts with contiguity like we talked about. So up to the north where we're discussing that A1 district before, we now have a bridge using GR to get to the industrial district all the way to the north. So that's one example. And then we also pick up that small, that shows up, yeah. We pick up this small A1 district down here just outside the center because of the GR. So it's small changes like that, but it's mostly because of the inclusion of GR.
Eric, are you layering from 1 to 3 to 6? Are you layering? Like, could you highlight when you go to 2 and say highlight, these are the additional? Or are they not exactly layered?
So we could potentially do that with 3 and 6 because 3 really is the base of 6. 6, it brings in GR and then a couple of those extraneous districts.
That might be helpful, just to show.
Yeah, but
3.
1 is very distinctly different because it's based on existing zoning districts, rather than the housing plan, map.
Do you mind going back to that chart you had up there? So, well, thanks. Or actually, not this one, but the compliance.
Sure.
Apologies.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I was just wondering, this is a follow-up on that layering that you were just talking about. What if you started, because I think, and Josh was talking about the idea of wanting to show existing districts. What if you could, I mean, could you layer like the existing zoning and then show on the next scenario, basically the boundary for the existing zoning, so you clearly see the expansion on the second scenario, and then on the third scenario, you'd show the delta between the second and the third. So it would be stepped.
Yeah, I see what you mean. We definitely could. If I had any concern about that visually, it would just be that the expansion from, say, scenario 1 to scenario 3 is not just an expansion of boundary, but also a change in district. In some cases, like we go from SRB to a GR or something like that. So we would just have to, like, when you start layering that on, it could get busy, but I'm happy to try it. It's not hard.
In the presentation, isn't it confusing to be calling them scenario 1, 3, and 6? Wouldn't
Yeah, we
call
can,
them
we
1,
can
2, and-
call them whatever. I was just trying to,
We're gonna call,
Keep it.
that connects us to our last meeting, that's
Right.
helpful, of course.
Yeah.
But in
we would go with
in
1.
the
1, 2,
presentation,
3.
it would be like 1, 2, and 3,
A, B,
right?
and C.
A, B, C, yeah.
A, B,
Know
C.
that it's 1, 3, and 6. Go ahead.
Just a question on the unit capacity. So central business residential. That I'm assuming we're talking about the downtown area. Broadly
It's
described?
those couple of parcels that we use to connect
Right,
on the
right.
west side.
Okay, that's 247 potential units. I thought in scenario 1. And I realize it's a bit mix and match here, that we were using a number of 337 units or something like that.
Yep.
Are those rationalized to each other? It strikes me as odd that 247 with the increased heights that you've talked about in the center business district, this yield is a lower number than the 337 that we're using in scenario 1. So I guess, are those rationalized, and could you maybe talk about it?
Sure. I think they're rationalized.
Well, that's why it's.
yeah. So I think some of that would be, there's only a couple of developable parcels out of what we're calling the center residential. Let's just go here. It's really only those couple of parcels on the left-hand side because those are privately owned. The stuff that's on the east side there is like the parking lot.
Sure, a lot of that's dead.
So it ends up becoming town-owned or excluded land. But when we, in scenario 1, where we measure the offset, we're measuring sort of the totality of what today is zoned as center business. So it includes all the stuff around the town green, north on Highland, up until you get to like the business district, for example. So it does include a lot more parcels in scenario 1, but the zoning is less flexible in scenario 1 than it is in 6. So, because you have lower heights, think
No,
you-
I
yeah.
understand, that's why I'm.
So it's like
confused.
this,
Yeah, yeah.
it's,
So very, too many variables.
yeah.
Okay,
it-
thank you very much.
yeah,
I don't wanna get.
But
too
I think it
many-
makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Another request, I don't know if this is possible, to show the geographic distribution of unit capacity around each of the stations. So like a Venn diagram with the numbers of units around the junction, and then the number of units. I
Like
guess,
within the half-mile radius.
exactly, yeah.
Okay, we can do that. It's just it's gonna be a lot.
The reason why I ask is because we have gotten a lot of comments, particularly about the heights, and if we can just quantify what the numbers are in each of the areas around the districts, that could be a good answer, you know, rather than just talking about the maps.
The circles overlap.
I know, so it could be a Venn diagram, you could have numbers, you know, in the overlap too. Am I making it really difficult?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
I can give you a number for each individual
Okay,
station area.
Thank you.
And, but I think you're right, that there has been criticism along those lines, it would be interesting to.
If we're gonna do that, maybe if it's possible to include the current number as well of units within those areas.
So we tried to do that by scenario per the request at the last
Yeah,
meeting.
Okay,
So that's what you'll see on the bottom.
Right there.
right,
Yeah.
But again, that's just done by scenario,
Yeah.
not by station area.
right, okay.
And it's just a clarifying question. So existing housing units that are built today or that are allowable under existing
No.
zoning?
No, built today.
What's on the ground?
That's more important.
Oh,
That's what people will identify with.
does existing housing units, are those multifamily units that comply with the guidelines?
Anything that's any housing unit.
Oh,
So we took every parcel, we looked at the assessor's data, we pulled the number of units for every parcel and added them together for all the overlapping parcels that fall within each scenario.
oh,
That's a useful chart.
I wonder if it's worth layering that into to your other chart that shows the net units, that does the math on the number of units
Oh, the
created,
compliance.
like a 5,000 and the, like, for perspective.
Yeah, that is fine. This is one of the most common misunderstandings that people have. And it doesn't help that the media often reports these. I don't mean ours necessarily, but I mean, just in general, across a lot of different media outlets. You'll see these comments that this is for 10,000 new units and it's just in Newton, for instance, and or 8,300, whatever it was. But it's just not. There's a large installed base
Yeah.
in a lot of these places.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not actually net new units, it's opportunity for zoning to create
Right.
Well,
new units, because people are gonna say, oh, you're basically gonna double the amount of unit, well, not really. It's only a small percentage that's actually gonna be built. So, cause that's, I think, scares everyone,
Yes.
right?
sorry, so when you say net, this, like in scenario one, this 1,132,
Yeah.
that's,
That's maximum.
well, that's what, so is it maximum or is that net?
Net.
So we add 1,132 to 505. so that's
Potential to add
max?
that.
Right.
Potential to add, but the chances that you will add that amount are almost impossible unless you demolish everything and start from scratch.
yeah,
Right.
Sudbury Farms would have to close, Rhodes Brothers. would
That's what
close.
people don't, I mean, that's the hard part of understanding of like what zoning changes are. It's
Right.
not that,
So in the S6 scenario on the table, it shows 5,000. Whatever it was, 40 units.
Right, yeah, okay.
But it's the potential for 3,572.
It's not,
Additional.
let me, hold on, let me just clarify what this is, because I don't want anybody to get confused, especially. So unit capacity line 4, whatever line that is, where it says 1637, 2630, 5,040. That's the model results from the compliance model of each of those scenarios that we talked about at the last meeting and the modified 6 that we talked about tonight. Existing housing units represent the assessor data for this town of Needham For every parcel that overlaps with those MBTA districts, we went in and just added up all the existing housing units, doesn't matter if they're multifamily, whatever. A lot of them are single family in GR, for example. And that's existing housing units. I apologize if I called it net new units, it was the way I was thinking of it. That is just, it's really just the difference between what the unit capacity is and how many units are there today, that's all it is. Yeah, I just want to be like crystal clear that that's like, it's just a subtraction, that's all it is. So it's kind of like, there's 505 housing units today, there's the zoning capacity potential of 1637. So like, really, if you think about it, it may result in 1,132 units.
Yeah.
It could result in 1637 if every single property owner sold their property and we redeveloped to the maximum of the zoning, then yeah, 1637 is possible. But I think there's a very, very, very small percentage chance that that would actually happen.
No, but that's like saying if I tear down my house and rebuild in the same place, it's like a new house, but it's the net new units, I mean, the way I've just tried to describe it to people is that's like the theoretical maximum number of new units that could be put in relative to what's there now.
Yeah.
Under that scenario.
Yes,
And I think we know, I think common sense tells us that a large number of these commercial parcels, some of them very well could happen, but that a good number of these are not likely to change anytime soon.
Yeah. definitely.
I don't think that existing housing units, net new units, I think it's only confusing and it doesn't tell us anything. If what we were having as existing years, existing multifamily housing units that exist today, whether they comply with the MBTA, because you might have required a special permit when they were built, or they might have been built under 40B. But that to me says something, whereas this, I don't.
Well, to
doesn't
Josh's
say
point
anything.
about people wanting to see what the change is, if they're in a single family home or a multifamily home, whatever, they want to see what the change could potentially be. So that tells them that in their district right now, or in the district, there are 505 existing housing units. They just want to know how many more they could potentially expect to
But the
see.
potential
With the rezoning.
increase is 1,637, not 1,132.
No,
Well,
it's
there's
not.
already 505.
But those are not
addition.
But
multifamily.
it doesn't matter if they're multifamily or not, it's the total
Total
number
number
of
of
units, it's the change that they could see happen, not what kind of unit it is.
Those 505 mostly are isn't it? Well, I guess, I don't know about the family, but they are multi-unit places, right? Isn't that Rosemary Ridge? And
Not necessarily.
Single family, plenty of single families.
in that particular scenario, I think the bulk of the 505 is that, in that particular case. I think if you
Well,
go,
I mean,
as you go to the right, I think in the
But-
GR. that's-
but either way,
Right.
the theory holds for all of them, this is what is real versus what is potential.
So Eric, I just want to make sure that, so it's existing, the 505, that row is existing housing units for current zoning, right? No,
It's just what exists.
existing housing units.
That's right. That's
So
exactly right.
the net new units, those are the new units if it was allowed, if it was rezoned. Or with the scenario.
Correct. It is the unit capacity of the scenario. If everything was rezoned and every parcel that could potentially changes, you could yield 1,637
Right,
units.
I understand the maximum unit capacity is 1637. I'm just saying that the 1132, everyone seems confused with the.
It's just subtracting, all it does is.
No, I
just
know what
subtract.
it is, but I'm just saying it's net new units based on the scenario.
Correct.
I think you need to say, just because otherwise, so existing housing is 505. With the scenario one, you can get 1132, there are total of maximum unit capacity of 1637, is that correct?
Correct.
Maybe, maybe, I mean, if we just move that unit capacity line
Below.
like, and make it like a addition,
Or,
But I still think
Equation.
you need to put maximum, because otherwise people are gonna think that that's just what's gonna happen
Right.
immediately.
Or potential additional units.
yeah,
Potential.
Mhm.
Katie.
I just want to contribute stating the complete obvious, but I know we keep saying it is what something's zoned to be won't be fully built out. And I just want to say that it's not just we can surmise that, we live that every day. Our existing zoning is not fully built out,
Right.
so there is existing unit capacity in all of our districts today. So I just wanted to kind of add
Right.
that. Because this is, you know, there's existing housing units, but if we ran what could be existing under our existing zoning, it would be bigger than 505. It would be bigger
Right.
than 703.
I think that's a really good
It
point.
just really,
Right,
Right.
there's a, yeah, the capacity is already there to some degree.
The capacity is there, this is what's built, right?
Yeah. Well, for instance, the Wexford overlay is, what, about 7 years old and nothing, as far as I know, nothing's happened with that, so that's 250 over by Staples. But it just hasn't happened.
Because it looks like it's doubling, but it's not because the potential, right? Sorry, Eric, I'm sure this is like.
not asking to change anything. I just wanted to state it for the group.
But no, but that's important because otherwise people think that you're just doubling, but they just don't understand that it hasn't been built to its capacity.
Okay, so are we okay with scenario 136 ABC 1, 2, 3? And
Yeah.
we'll make these changes to the maps. We'll try to layer things and make it as clear as we possibly can. Okay. All right, so public meeting 2, I was hoping to start with just the run of show like I did last time. Just try to walk the group through the timeline and the activity, or I guess the series of activities for the meeting first before we dive into the details of it. So Emily and I took a first crack at putting something together. We met with staff and the co-chairs earlier this week, I think Tuesday, I want to say, to talk about that. And we made some pretty substantial changes between now and then, between today and then. So I'd just like to walk through these details. And I will fully admit, we don't have every single answer to every single detailed question. We don't have the materials made up yet. But I'm hoping this is enough to gain your confidence and so that we can finish out what we need to do. Basically by the end of next week, we've been asked to deliver all the materials, to the staff and the chairs. You can't see that. Okay, so hopefully this looks familiar from last time. So we're meeting on the 18th, meeting is planned to start at 7. I'm assuming it's gonna go till 9 o'clock. If it goes later, you want it to go later, that's fine. But just the way I built it out, it ends at 9. For this one, we really don't need volunteers like we had last time. We're not planning on doing big boards, big stations. It's gonna be a very different meeting, as I think the co-chairs mentioned at the beginning. If anyone would like to volunteer to do the sign-in again, that would be great. If there's 2 folks, you don't need to tell me now, just be there and we can do it. So there'll kind of be 4, I think, key pieces to this. There'll be an introduction by either the co-chairs or staff. I wasn't sure based on our last meeting who would do that, but we'll figure that out. Someone will do an introduction. I believe based on our conversation this week, that introduction would include the kind of not only the goals for this meeting and what we're hoping to get out of it, but also potentially talking a little bit about the process and the time frame, because we are kind of entering into a time frame where decisions need to be made so that we can begin drafting the zoning and finalizing the scenario. So I think the goal at the beginning of the meeting and then again at the end is to sort of just reiterate that timeline and that decisions are really going to start to be made over the next few months. Then we'll have the presentation of the scenarios 1, 2, and 3, as well as a survey. And I'll talk a little bit more about just an outline of the presentation, and I'll share with you the draft survey questions. But just as an overall, the idea would be to first in the presentation, I want to talk about the feedback that we heard at the last meeting. I think it's important to recognize that we got a ton of feedback and a lot of people participated, what that feedback was. and then talk about the three scenarios. What I've been asked to do is talk about them at a high level and say, these are like the big picture differences between 1, 2, and 3, sort of where those ideas came from. And the reason I want to talk about the feedback at the beginning is because scenario 6 is largely based on public feedback plus our discussion at the last meeting. So I think it's nice to make that tie so people understand that we listened to them. We brought that into at least one of the scenarios, and here's what that looks like. So that would be the setup of the presentation. We'll walk through those 3 scenarios and provide the information to participants in the meeting. After that, we would then open up sort of a simultaneous survey. We'd have a SurveyMonkey version online available to anyone. I should mention this meeting will be hybrid as well, just like last time. So I think Emily and Alex will run the hybrid portion of that. I could talk about what that'll be like. But the presentation will be simultaneous like it was last time. So everybody will hear me and the chairs and everybody give the same information at the same time. We would then open up an online survey through SurveyMonkey that would have the questions that I'm gonna share with you, plus the maps in downloadable format, so people could download those as a PDF and be able to zoom in on their own computer. Emily expressed last time it was really difficult to do that on the fly, to like zoom in, and she wasn't sure where everybody wants to look at the same time. So everybody will be able to see the maps on their own screen. Folks who are in the room with us in person will have an option for the survey. If they have a smartphone or a tablet or whatever is connected to the internet, they could choose to do it online and do the same thing that the hybrid participants are doing or the online participants are doing. We'll also have printed copies of the maps and the surveys on like 8.5 by 11, the questions, so, and pens and pencils, so people can fill those out in person. If you don't want to do it on your smartphone, you don't have access to one, you forget it at home, we want to have that option for people. So we'll collect those at the end of the meeting. So there'll be 2 options for each of the, I think we have 6 questions in total. For each of the questions, the idea would be for me to read the question out loud. So everybody, both virtually and in person, is hearing the question from me. And then I will give an explanation and some additional detail about that question, so people know exactly what we're asking and why we're asking it and why we're trying to get feedback on that specific question. So they understand like why the committee is asking and how they're going to then use that feedback. I'll give you some examples of what that detail might look like. So given that we're going to try to do a presentation plus about 6 survey questions, give or take, I wanted to allot about 40 minutes or 35 to 40 minutes to do that. I think people are gonna need some time to be able to like flip back to the maps as they answer the questions. Because we are gonna ask some questions about boundaries as well as unit capacity and density. So I want people to have ample time to be able to go back and forth and feel comfortable answering those questions. I will say we're gonna leave the survey open for a week and a half-ish after the meeting. So if people don't feel comfortable taking it then, want some more time, want to go back and rewatch the presentation, we're going to leave it open. Anybody who missed the meeting, obviously we want their input too. So there'll be additional time for them to do that. The presentation will be recorded like last time, so they'll be able to watch that and basically do the exact same exercise on their own time over that week and a half period. Is it
We're gonna
6?
keep
It
it
was
open.
6 days? Sorry.
No,
I keep-
we'll keep it
sorry,
open
6
for
days.
6 days.
And there's a reason for that, just because of the timeline of when we have to meet and make decisions, so it can't be open to, 6 days. It'll be open after the meeting. So we'll go through that process, 35, 40 minutes. We feel like that should give people enough time to answer the couple of questions that we're asking. We'll have a box to just collect the surveys from folks, the ones that they do in person. Everything else will obviously be recorded online through SurveyMonkey. Really easy tabulation. That'll help us when we need to come back and present to you very shortly after the 18th. Then we will move to what we talked about, I think, at the last meeting, which was the open mic comment period and questions. So I have built in here a little over an hour. You can tell me if that's enough time, not enough time. This is just my own run of show. Happy to change it. And then we just have 5 minutes for that wrap up and next steps.
Just a question, during the open mic period, how do the people who are participating remotely
So I think what we want to do is have them raise their hands and get in a queue like they would in a Zoom. And we will probably just go one in person, one online. Yep. And Emily and Alex will basically, I think, bring them in, unmute them, allow them, and then we can either, if it's a question, we can answer. If it's a comment, we can report it.
I think we're gonna need to devote more time to that portion.
We started earlier.
We can't start it earlier. We can't start the meeting earlier
No, I-
because we sent out,
Sorry, I meant earlier than 7:50. We start the public comment earlier.
well, we have this other portion. We can't have, we want to have the maps for people to comment on. So the presentation has to go first. The meeting can't start earlier than 7 because it's been noticed for 7 already. So
Maybe it goes to 9:30.
What about the survey?
15 or
Could,
something.
could,
maybe it's a longer meeting. It's gonna have to be a longer meeting.
is there a way to inform people that public comment's not gonna start until 7:50? Because I'm worried people are gonna show up at 7 and be disappointed that they can't comment until 7:50.
Well,
But they have the agenda.
I mean, the agenda will be online. And when we notice the meeting in, say, the Newsy Needham, we can put in some more detail about that.
Yeah.
But I'm not super sad that people will have to look at the presentation first, like, that's an important part of this. And we want their unadulterated feedback, but we'd also like their informed feedback. So I hear what you're saying, and I know that that does happen. But I want people to listen to the presentation, so I'm not sad if that's how it falls out.
I'm not looking for your veto set, I guess.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, I think this is a necessary part of it, so we can ask Amy to help us get the word out that public comment starts after the presentation. But I don't think we can change the order of the presentation because of the things that are already fixed. But we can definitely make the meeting longer.
So we usually do the presentation and then the public comments typically, don't we?
Mhm.
For most of it?
Yeah.
Maybe it's just, yeah, maybe making the agenda super clear that 7:50.
Yeah, survey questions were referred to. You said 6 survey questions. What are the questions?
Yeah, we'll get to
That's
that.
what we're gonna get to.
I have them all.
We're going to
Yep.
get to that, okay.
Yeah, I just want to make sure everyone's comfortable with the format, the timing and the stuff, then we'll get to the detail.
Somehow I thought I missed it. For a minute,
you're good.
with the survey question. Okay, it's later. I wanted to ask, I forget if I was speaking with someone who was suggesting this. But you know how the League of Women Voters handles large community meetings like the, the candidates night and the recent the event in October about news coverage we have in Needham today. They ask people to write their questions on an index card and hand them to people who walk around to collect the questions. Then somebody looks at those questions, because many times people asking the same question or focused on the same thing. And so they use some judgment saying, well, this is about this, this is about this, this is about this. Do you think a process like that is helpful?
I think we can definitely ask people to write questions down, because there will be some people who don't want to stand up and ask their question, and we can definitely consolidate a bit there, but I do think that people will want to
They
stand up
want
and
to ask their own question
questions
themselves with their own
and-
voice.
and say their piece, whether it's a question or not. And I don't want to inhibit that, but I think that's another good thing that we can
Mhm.
provide.
Okay, I just wanted to throw that out as a possibility, but I hear you saying, people want to use their own voice
I think so.
rather than have some person collecting the questions and then asking them, that's different. It's a different kind of way of doing it.
Particularly for a public meeting, this is for public, league isn't. I think it's important to have a very open
Mhm.
process.
I mean, we will ask people to be considerate and like, if someone's already asked a question or expressed your thought, then maybe, if you need to stand up and say, I feel the same way, or I second that person's comment,
So that we can get
but
more
then we
questions.
can get more people in.
Right.
Ask them to do that, but there's only so much, people want to tell us what they're thinking.
Okay.
But we do want to have some type of a limit so we can get the most, responses and questions. Because if you leave it open-ended, and I think you did it last time, or one of the meetings we did, maybe it wasn't for this, maybe it was for something else, it was for the housing. But I think setting a limit, like 3 minutes or whatever it is helpful.
Yeah.
So that people can be concise and we can get, the good answers.
As long as it's enforced fairly for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think the time limit would be good only because last time we had 300 people. Even if 50% of those people ask questions, that's a lot of questions times even 2 minutes.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of time.
And I know that we've talked about having a board for comments where people could, and I don't know if this maybe overlaps with Jean's suggestion, but like having a place where people who have something that they want to say, but they don't want to stand up and say it for whatever reason, could write it down. We can take it back and bring it all together.
Sure.
Offline, yeah.
Yeah,
For people
definitely.
So whether that's a Post-it note or an index card or a board or whatever, we can definitely make something like that happen too.
Great. For the open mic period, do you have a sense of? Do you want to post a time or do you want to just let it go?
Postal time in terms of
Like,
when.
when an anticipated stop time, or do you want to just? Let it go?
For the entire time for it, or for the 3
Yeah,
minutes?
if we started, oh no, I was just thinking, if we start at 7:50, do you have a sense of, do you want to have a time where we're like, okay, we need to get out of the building for some reason, or, whatever that, or do you want to just leave it open-ended?
I mean. What are our constraints? Do we know?
The lights automatically shut off at 11, but we would just turn them back on. So there are not constraints. We can stay as late as you all want to.
Okay.
No constraints.
Yeah, I mean. I would say like when it starts to be like we're hearing a lot of repeats.
We need to say we're taking a few more questions
then-
because otherwise. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think
I just think it's important
I haven't been to one of these yet that hasn't organically closed.
I just think it's important not to limit debates, discussion.
Right,
I
but
mean,
we
we're
also, there
already-
also has to be a limit. We can't be there at 1 o'clock in the morning.
If everybody is
Yeah,
getting up and saying the same thing,
I mean, if we,
we can reasonably say like,
if we got.
raise your hand if you agree, and we can get some kind of consensus without everyone sleeping in the building.
I mean, if we got to a point where we really, everyone was talking and was going very late, we could just have another hearing at another date also, right?
I think,
My own view is we send a message that it ends at approximately 9:30 or
Right,
some
yeah.
word that's soft, but sends a message that it's not a marathon. It's not an
Right.
endurance test. It's a chance to get.
Yeah, we don't wanna have to bring snacks.
No, and frankly, it disfavors certain elements of the public to go super late too. Because
It does.
it's late and they need to get up in the morning or
They
they're
wanna-
tired,
they
or
wanna
they have
con-
medical issues or.
they want to be part of it.
Yeah.
But if we say at 9:50, I think at like at 9:50, let's say we go to 9:30, at 9:15, we should say, please only stand up if you have something different to say, because we want to make sure that we get to hear everyone's, and make it a point to kind of start wrapping up like 30 minutes before or something so that.
Yeah, and I have to say that, I mean, I know that there's a lot of emotion around these issues, but I personally feel like I've been to a lot of similarly themed events in Needham, and people do tend to be, considerate of their neighbors, not making everyone stay forever because they're repeating something. People are considerate. They want to be heard. But when they are, I haven't been to one that hasn't just come to a natural conclusion at some sort of reasonable hour. So,
It's suggested here that people could have follow-up questions that they could submit even after the event. could there be a way of saying to people, when you get to a point where we know we want to end in 15 minutes, to say, we only have time for about 4 more questions or something like that. But you've been provided with these index cards. If you write out your question, it will be answered in a public way on the website or however you plan to have these
Sure, I think-
questions
yeah.
answered.
Yes, I'm sure that we can do that. And that's the plan anyway, for having a board or having questions written on index cards during the event. People can always use the email address too, to send more
Yeah.
questions or feedback. I think we need to talk about, hearing comments versus answering
I'm sorry,
questions.
right,
Yeah.
Because
that's what I was
Right.
bringing
my
up now.
concern is that people are going to expect some kind of thesis that we provide afterwards, answering the question point by point, and I don't know that that's in the plan, so I just want to express that I think this meeting is for hearing people's thoughts, and of course, there will be questions. Brief, objective questions we'll try to answer when they're asked, because everyone needs those answers. More theoretical questions or like larger issue questions,
We have to get back to them.
I think those are things that we bring back and discuss at our following meeting. And my hope is that the people who ask those questions are gonna tune in or read the minutes or something, but I don't know that we at least have something where there's gonna be a feedback function. And I just wanna make that clear that people shouldn't be like waiting for us to give them a call with the answer. That's not really how I think this is set up to work, unless somebody has ideas about that.
But I mean, if there are some objective questions, they should be answered
Well,
then.
yes, yes,
And,
yes,
and questions for clarification.
yeah,
If people
Yeah,
don't
I'm
understand
saying-
something that's presented, they want.
yes, of course, yeah.
We certainly couldn't start working on FAQs, so I think a lot of it might be technical clarifications about what the law says and what's our timeline and things like that. So I think the staff, we can certainly, with all the feedback, collate and start putting together some FAQs to put on the website. But I agree, we're not gonna go by survey and kind of email everyone back about their particular question. But Heidi, to your point, the things that are more general about Holmes process and questions about where this group is thinking and going, that your next meeting is the place for that discussion to continue.
Cool, okay, great. So it sounds like we'll let this go till at a minimum 9:15. And we'll sort of see how things are going. Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, so that's the overview of the meeting. Like I said, just at the end, the hybrid option will be available for anyone who would like to join virtually. The setup will be very similar, where they'll have a link to join in. Alex and Emily will be there to moderate. The idea with this one a little bit different than last time. I think Emily was planning on just sort of welcoming people. But then we want them to be able to hear everything that the introduction says, what I'm saying, the survey is saying. So I think the role of both Emily and Alex, just from sort of facilitating, will be much lower than last time, substantially lower than last time. And I think Emily's idea was, once the presentation and the survey portion is done, she was probably gonna come into the room with the rest of us in case there are questions that maybe she is best suited to answer, particularly around, maybe around zoning. So that she would be in there, and then maybe Alex, you're sort of just muting or unmuting people and allowing them to ask the questions as we go back and forth.
I have a question just in general. Can we troubleshoot? With last time, it was hard to figure out how to do online and in person, and it took up some of the time. Is there something we need to do with IT for the town to be able to figure that out?
The issue was audio in Powers Hall, not the hybrid component.
Oh,
But
right.
we can follow up with Mark.
Yeah, just the update is I saw Mark 2 days ago and there's a new, I think, soundboard, which he's hoping will solve the problem.
He's gonna do some troubleshooting and testing, but he doesn't have an actual meeting before our meeting. So that's sort of where we are with Mark, at least this time. If there's an issue, which we hope there's not, and that the new soundboard will solve the problem, but at least this time we sort of know what our plan B is, and we don't have to send Heidi to the wolves
Poor
for
Heidi,
a half
did an
hour.
amazing job.
Anyway, that's sort of the update there.
Cool. Okay. Go back to the deck. Okay, so we talked about the purpose of the meeting, and we talked a lot about the purpose of the presentation. So first, I just wanted to share, similar to what I did last time, just some high-level bullet points on what I was thinking for the presentation deck. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have this all fleshed out by the end of next week in advance of the meeting. So first would be to recap the feedback from public meeting 1 and provide folks with that recap. I think that's really important. We can show the results of the stations, the levers. We can talk about some of the prominent questions and comments that we got, because we have all those recorded. And then I would like to take the time to describe then how that feedback is incorporated back into scenario 6. The second part of the presentation would be, as I mentioned, describing the 3 scenarios. So we would have the maps up, and then we can also include, I was thinking, along with each, just a snapshot of like the total acres, the unit capacity, and the density, just so people have a sense of what that difference is between each of the 3 scenarios. I would, at a high level, walk through the differences between the 3, sort of how we arrived at those as a group, why those were chosen. Then we would go to the survey questions. And here's where we would try to provide the detail on the specific questions. So I'll share the questions with you all. This is the logic for the online survey. Obviously, the paper would just be the questions are there and you're filling them out, but online, we need to have logic, otherwise it's gonna get confusing in SurveyMonkey. So what we are proposing to do is question number 1, which is on the left-hand side of the screen. We would ask folks, of the 3 scenarios presented this evening, 1, 2, and 3, which scenario at least most closely aligns with your vision for complying with MBTA communities here in Needham, recognizing that there probably isn't one of those that's going to be perfect. So out of all of them, which ones do you feel the most comfortable with? And then we're going to ask them to rank them in order of 1, 2, and 3, 1 being their most preferred, 3 being their least preferred. So what's going to happen then is, based on their ordinal preference, there's going to be a logic jump in SurveyMonkey that then jumps them to questions specifically about the scenario that they said is my number 1 preference, or the one that most closely aligns. The reason we need to do that is if we try to present like all 3 scenarios and have them walk through all 6 questions for all 3 scenarios, it is going to get so unbelievably confusing that we decided, like, you got to pick one and that's what you're going to answer on. The paper survey will be the exact same. The only difference will be for question 1, you'll still do your ordinal ranking. And then we'll probably have a little box at the top of question 2 that says, which one did you pick for question 1? So you'll write 1, 2, or 3, and you'll just write, yep, I'm answering now for scenario 1. You'll just do it that way.
Well, what do you mean by a paper survey?
A physical piece of paper that someone will fill out with a pen.
They're gonna be handed that when they come
Correct.
to the meeting?
If they want it, only if they want
They
it.
have access to both,
Yep.
just in case someone doesn't want to do it online.
Yeah, I'm just,
So the survey
worried that
will
if someone-
jump right into it, but the other survey will be right there. That will be question number 2.
sorry, what was that?
In the Survey Monkey, it'll guide you into from question to question to question, right? But in the paper one, will it do it the same way? You'll just in
The questions will be in numerical
the
order.
same order,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And then
So-
they hand that in.
Yeah, at the end of the meeting, we definitely want
At
to
the end of
collect
the
that from
meeting.
them. Yes,
People can't be doing a survey while they're at the meeting.
they
Yes,
could.
we
It would be
can.
right on their phone.
We usually do
Yeah.
for a lot of meetings.
He's gonna be asking the questions and giving people a chance to answer. This is part of the presentations that I'm doing this survey, along with the explanation.
But if they want more time, they've got 6 days. If it feels like a pressure, yeah, rush.
Well,
Particularly because some people may want to hear questions first or ask questions, get
Right,
answers before they.
that's a good point.
Right, so they'll have the option to do it later.
that's true.
So just,
Oh, like during the Q and A period, then do it afterward, yeah,
Yeah.
again, definitely.
so since we're now talking about survey questions with numbers, let's just make sure that the scenarios aren't numbered. Let's give them A, B, C,
Yeah.
or small, medium,
Right.
large.
But even, yeah, it would even get
Whatever.
confusing from 1 through 6 to 1, yeah.
Yeah, let's just not make them numbered.
To have A, B, or C or something instead of 1,
Yeah.
2, 3.
Yeah, no, it's a good idea. Thank you.
Right, so just a wording change in number 2.
Mhm.
Just simplify a little bit to see if the boundary please note if you'd like to see the boundaries changed in any way. Just leave it more open-ended, I guess, and simpler.
Yep, when you see the next slide, just let me know if you still feel the same way.
Okay.
Only because the way we have it structured, we are trying to figure out for each of the individual work point sub-districts. So I, A1, GR, et cetera. Do they want any of those specific boundaries changed? Cause we're thinking like somebody might be really comfortable with the business district, for example, it's right here, yep, we're good. But maybe GR is up here is way too big, so they wanna say like, we wanna shrink that a little bit or something like that. So I think we figured out a way to do that in a simplistic way. Yeah. So it would jump to your preferred scenario in question 2, where we would ask you about, the actual boundaries that are drawn on the map, which is why those 3 maps are important for people to have access to, so they can look at their preferred scenario map. And they could say, look at each of the sub-district boundaries and say, I like those or I don't like those, and I'll show you just what that looks like in a second. And then after they filled out question number 2, you'd be then jump to question number 3 about your scenario, which is, please note if you'd prefer to see any changes in the number of units and or the units per acre, or as we refer to it as density, for any of the specific sub-districts. So maybe somebody feels like 1,200 units in Chestnut Street under scenario 6 is way too much. They can tell us like, I think this is too much, or I think this is just right, or I don't think it's enough. So, Josh, this is what question 2 would look like on the paper survey. Online, we just need to figure out, it'll be a little different than this. So the idea would be, if you want to see any changes to the boundaries in any of the individual districts, please let us know. If you would prefer to expand it, keep it, shrink it.
I was just,
Oh, excuse me.
the thing I was thinking of is, if someone wants a person to say they want something else that's not included in one of these districts, how would they indicate that?
We have an open-ended question at the end to try to capture
Okay.
all other feedback, on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
The boundaries of the districts are as they are. They have been this way for decades. Like the business district B, it's been that way for decades. But I don't think we're even talking about changing the boundaries of any of the districts. The question is whether in the business district, we will allow multifamily housing. I mean, that's what we're proposing, right? We're not changing the boundaries of the districts. So that, I find that would be kind of confusing to people,
But we could.
but I don't know what purpose that would serve at all.
You're
mean-
expanding the apartment districts, you're enlarging where they're located. They're located in new areas.
So you.
Yeah, well, that's true. With regard to apartment area 1, we are,
You're
It's not like-
introducing it into new.
we're talking about, but I guess the confusing thing is when it says expand the district, there is an existing apartment A1 district that exists now in our zoning bylaw. There's an existing business district. But what we're talking about is, with regard to the proposed apartment A1 in scenario 2, do you want to expand it? I don't know exactly the wording to get that concept across.
Would it be just based on the map from the scenario you've chosen?
Yeah,
something like that.
I
yeah.
think that this is just more geographical, as Josh was alluding to earlier. I mean, I think we're thinking of it as districts. Public is just gonna think of it as geography. And so really, this question is asking, do you want it to be smaller or bigger, or leave it
Yeah.
alone?
I mean, also, this is gonna most likely be an overlay district, so it doesn't necessarily have to line up with existing zoning boundaries. It just has to line up with parcels.
We haven't been talking about overlay districts very much at all.
It could be, right? I mean,
Yeah, I thought that's what we discussed a couple of meetings ago.
Yeah, Jean, I think it's not so specific as more general, like we would like maybe the apartment district only wants to be half of what is being shown from the maximum, let's say, and.
You mean in the business, say the business B zone? That's the stretch from Sudbury Farms, down to the funeral homes, isn't it?
Right.
I think, you're saying we don't want to allow multifamily housing in all of that zone. We only want to allow it in this part of the zone. Is that what?
It's getting the
Or
feedback.
people will say, I wanna include less general residents. And that alone, I mean, that is a very non-specific comment, but still valid, you know, they're gonna say make it
So
smaller,
Maybe that's
Or-
where
whatever.
the open-ended question at the end. So if, use industrial, right? You've got a handful of industrials. If there was one industrial that you want to shrink it by removing that individual, you'd have the opportunity to call that
Definitely.
out. That might be something to highlight, maybe, as you're going through the
Yeah.
explanation.
I should say, everyone who is online and in person, as well as those who hopefully choose to watch the presentation afterwards, will have the benefit of my explanation. So it's not like they're just gonna see this question and have no idea what to do. I mean, there'll be a thorough explanation alongside every question.
Yeah, I guess one question that I have, and maybe what Jean is asking, or maybe not, is are they basing the boundaries on the existing zoning? They're basing it on the scenario.
Yes, they have to look at their preferred scenario map and then
Right. Which you said that based on your, so maybe, yeah.
But within those districts, we're proposing housing. And so the question is whether or not that housing should be introduced throughout that entire district at that location, or in a
Just
smaller,
some smaller
or some
portion of the
smaller
district.
portion of that, I think. I mean, the district is a representation of where the housing is being introduced, and then the question is, should the housing be introduced in that district as it is, or should it be expanded, or should it be shrunk?
Eric, you're gonna have to explain it a little more when the question comes up, because to make sure that you get the answers that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then this is the question number 3. It's broken into two pieces. So the first piece would be about the unit capacity, and this is what I said on each of the maps. I want to have what the unit capacity is for each scenario, as well as the density, just so people have a reference point. So basically just repeats the same format as we just went over. Do you want to see more units, leave it as is, or a decrease in the units in each of those districts? And the same for the units per acre. Maybe people feel like 40 is too high, or whatever the number is, they want to see it lower.
Are they gonna have the tables that you just showed us? Showing the number of proposed units and density?
Yeah, we've got to try to put that like on the corner of the map somehow, so that
Would
that
you put it as
information
a
is there.
column here on this questionnaire, so they know what the fact is they're responding to?
We're gonna be looking for that.
So the challenge with that is, for the paper version, we don't know which scenario they're gonna choose. So we would, and under each scenario, each district's unit capacity is different because the zoning that we tested is different, so. Yeah, we're trying to find the best way to do it that is hopefully simple, but you know, gets what we need. But I'm open to feedback. But yeah, we'll make the information available to folks.
Okay, feedback, actually, so on the maps, is it possible, I don't know how you chose the color codings for the districts right now, but is it possible to color code it on a scale based upon the density, for instance? So that more dense ones are in a darker shade of something, and less dense or lighter shade?
Yeah, we could do that. We chose the colors just so that visually the districts are consistently colored like a zoning map, so that people, if they're used to looking at a zoning map, And then we chose the colors for the districts themselves, like the oranges and the yellows for residential. We chose like a blue for different shades of commercial, stuff like that, like kind of typical land use colors. That's the only reason why we did it that way.
Because you want to see contrast easily.
I know there are pros and cons, but I was just thinking of ways to convey density on a map. Without also having to look at the table separately.
Personally, I think, we had at the stations, at our first meeting, had images of typical housing tied to certain density. Are we going to include that in the back at some mark? Because I think that's more real
Or
for
in the
me.
presentation.
Yeah, we talked about, I was gonna put that in the presentation for this specific question. We have some ideas. We're working through some ideas this week on how to present that.
Yeah, okay, if
Yeah.
that could be handy to people.
But I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree. I think real world examples of like what 10 or 20 units an acre looks like. Yeah.
This question's gonna take a long time to answer because you have 3 rows, 2 different charts, and then whatever, 8 or whatever. I'm just wondering. Are people gonna have enough time to be able to digest and answer so many questions?
I mean, the other option is we could just focus on units because units
I think that's.
density is a,
I'm not sure that, you know, without explanation, and people are gonna understand the difference between these two questions.
I think I would do the top one.
Yeah. I would be happy with just using it. What is the group?
I agree.
Agree.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, it's amazing information if you could get it, but it takes a lot of brain power and they're not gonna get to question 4.
And that's really the crux of it anyway, right?
yeah, because we're gonna get the size of the district, which drives the acreage, then we'll get the units and you really just divide the two and you end up with density anyway, so. Okay, good, thank you. Question 4 was requested to sort of circle back on the idea of mixed use in our business districts. I think there was a feeling that we needed to kind of come back to this, particularly for the center business district, and ask that question again. How people feel about either mandatory mixed use, allowing both mixed use and multifamily, or having multifamily as of right. There was a request to also add in Chestnut Street and Avery Square, so we'd be asking that same question about mixed use in all 3 of those districts to get a sense of how people feel about those.
I think it's helpful to use the phrase standalone multifamily. Because I think of course, the mixed use has multifamily, but we continually have been using the phrase standalone multifamily. I think that's more understandable.
Are you gonna ask this question separately for each of the 3 or just have them bundled together?
I was hoping that for question 4, 5, and 6, it would just jump, it'll jump back to just being generic questions about the districts in the town. Because the center business district, for example, it's not, I guess technically it's not really included in any of the 3. I know we have the residential piece. But like the true center business district as it stands today is mostly remaining the same. And I think Chestnut and Avery are present in all 3 scenarios, I believe. So the hope was then with question 4, 5, and 6, they're just answering kind of broad-based, really policy questions, at that point about the inclusion of mixed use or not.
I think it's a really good question. I think the first paragraph, if there were bullet points, it might be easier to read. I would just say, you know, the state's MBTA guidelines cannot require mixed use in an MBTA district. This is what we have today. Bullet 1, mixed use is required in the center business district in order to build multifamily. Number 2, zoning district cannot be considered because they're each individual things. When they're lumped together, it just, it's super clear, but it's confusing to read.
And it's gonna be a tough atmosphere to like read in,
Right.
honestly.
I'd also suggest the sentence about today mixed use is required maybe we just talk about it as if we're not zoning experts and say, today in the center, you can only build housing if commercial's on the first floor. And not use mixed use and multifamily and.
Right.
So is the question being asked for each individual district, or is it being asked for the districts as a group?
That's, the district as a group is what I think he just answered.
But
Right?
I think we want the answer, I
Yeah.
think we want the answer specifically for the center too. I mean, not as a group.
Yeah, because I think I feel differently about
So maybe we could just break it out right underneath that
It-
question and have a yes or no.
it-
I think,
will be,
I think
yeah.
it needs to be broken up.
It will be broken out, because we want the answer for the individuals.
Right, otherwise you
Yeah.
might get the wrong answer for.
Yeah.
the wrong-
It's,
Right,
it's gonna be broken out in
For the-
a table like we had for the other one.
Okay,
So there'll be the options of
okay. fine.
mandatory mixed use, blah, 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 as we go across for each
Okay.
district. Yep, definitely.
But Katie's comment that something about what we mean by mixed use,
First floor commercial.
Right.
is needed.
I worry that this is very complicated. People
I
aren't,
think.
yeah. I mean, it's a complicated subject, but.
Oh, no.
But the survey in particular.
Very challenging.
This
I don't know, I
this
think-
is an
I think they've
important
done a nice
question
job of simplifying it.
about,
And I think
do
the
you
fact that
want
walking through the
standalone multifamily housing in our section?
No, I agree.
As they're being considered is helpful.
I'm trying to think how to listen it.
I think all of it is great. I just think bullet points, just so that they can compartmentalize one at a time. It's easier to read. I think. But
Do you think that like after the initial presentation, people have enough information to answer this question?
Well, they're answering
think
it
so.
during the presentation.
They can.
Or within 6 days.
Or within
Yeah.
6 days, yeah, with the
I guess,
survey.
well, if you were sitting in that audience, what information would you need to answer that question confidently?
I think I would want to hear other people's questions, like from the audience, like concern, like, I wouldn't know, I'm just trying to think of, someone who hasn't been paying attention to this. I don't know where, might not really know where the district is that you're talking about. I might not know what the concern is, like, what are the pros and what are the cons of having mixed use versus not?
What if I explained that when I read the question, I talk about that
that would be
for 2
helpful.
minutes?
That would be very helpful.
That's the idea.
Okay.
I'm not just gonna read the question.
Okay.
Yeah, the idea is they're gonna get an explanation of, if you do this, this is potentially what happens. If you make this choice, this is what potentially could happen.
I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I'm thinking from our first workshop, and the confusion around this is, in my mind, we're asking this question to understand what people's visions are for these areas and not to get lost in the complexities of the law and this offset count and none of that actually matters.
Right.
So I wonder if we just kind of reframe the question and take it out of the technicalities and just say, for these 3 districts, are you comfortable with standalone? Yes or no, or require first floor commercial, because I don't want somebody to answer the question thinking, I want the minimum, so I want an offset, or have it be a way to have us think that they're trying to get to compliance. I want to know how they feel about commercial on the first floor.
Right.
Is that?
I think that makes
More how they
sense.
envision the life of the center, the life of Chestnut Street, life of Gateway Square.
Yeah,
But you still have to put the MBTA guidelines. We know that we cannot require mixed use as an MBTA district and then.
Do we though? I mean, as long as, if they tell us what they want, our job is to find a way to make it work. Do they need to know why?
Well, they do, because then it doesn't become part of the MBTA district, then we have to do,
But then we have,
Take it away.
so we have to rejigger it, but that doesn't mean that we lose anything necessarily.
but some people might think that those areas is how you're gonna get the full density, but if it's a mixed use. I'm just trying to, I don't know, maybe not, maybe.
Maybe we say we can achieve the compliance either way. So how do you feel about it with commercial on the first floor?
What's most important to you?
Right, because we can achieve compliance regardless
Right,
of,
and
but it should
Where
be
we
like,
like-
shouldn't we
So,
say that there's a
if all 3 are
limitation to
taken out.
mixed use development in the MBTA communities? And when but we could reach compliance, you don't think it's important?
I mean,
Okay.
it's important, but whether it's important as a way to frame the question, I don't know. I mean, I think Kate's point is absolutely true. We can do it either way.
Okay,
The way we've chosen to portray it on the maps is our choice.
and well, we could change it.
I mean, it could change. So the question,
Okay.
the answer that we're trying to get, the information that we're trying to get is how do they feel about
Standalones?
commercial on the first floor versus standalone multi-family housing in these business districts? And that's the answer that we want to get. I don't think they necessarily need to know why.
The
Like, what's-
technicality of
what's-
how to,
yeah.
yeah.
They need to know why we're asking it, but not like, what are the complexities involved in making it
No, I
happen?
agree.
Yeah, but doesn't this do it? I mean, I like the idea of the bullet points, but isn't this question just right to the point? It's pretty good.
I don't think so. It could be simpler. Josh, you kept on interrupting.
The other thought, potential confusion is, this is just talking about those districts. If people have preference for mixed use elsewhere, that's a very different question.
Yes, it is a different question.
Yeah, the business district that we talked about earlier, would they prefer to see mixed use only allowed? We
Yeah,
haven't even talked about that.
could it just be a chart? Like, could you have like could you have a grid? Of, three options, like, mixed use, residential only, commercial only. And
In the district.
the districts, yeah,
That's exactly what I wanna do.
okay.
Yeah, but to date, I was only gonna do it for those three, but I can easily add others if that's what the committee.
I would say those three, and then just in other buckets. And it's just not overcomplicated, I guess.
I think we should just focus on those three.
You can always
I
have
was-
it, you could just do that one question, would you support standalone or make, however we want to describe mixed use? In the center business, Chestnut, Brady Square, like separate, and then any other district or something like that, maybe.
I think, or what we're trying to, I think, really get here, because we're really introducing standalone housing in Chestnut Street. In every square, standalone housing is already introduced into the zoning as an allowed use. I think it's really the question about the center. I think that's the question we're trying
That's the
to
big
answer,
one. Yeah.
is how do people feel about the center?
Why don't we ask that?
Well,
But-
I disagree.
Okay, narrow it
Yeah, I
down
think
to
we
I
that,
disagree.
right?
I'd like to ask the question about, commercial centers in all three of these places, because
I think we should ask that question for all three of them, but I'm just saying that I
there's
think
different opinions on them.
the answer is gonna be.
So Eric, do you have the information you need?
Yeah, so we're gonna,
It's like they're not paying me enough.
we're gonna simplify the question to be really more philosophical. What do we
Yes.
wanna see?
Oh,
Is it mixed use or is it standalone residential? Or
Yeah.
introducing standalone residential? Or keep it mandatory mixed
But
use?
at some level, right, if everybody said they want mixed use in all three of these,
We're dead.
well, you're pushing the density then well beyond the
Especially
corridor.
Chestnut Street.
And I think people need to understand that, right, because there's that push and pull.
Right.
So maybe that's a reason, that's an argument to include the statement about the limitation. So they understand the context in which the question is being asked.
I think it's gonna make a lot more work for this committee after that public meeting if we have to eliminate center business, Chestnut Street and Avery from one of these scenarios. To those point, you're gonna have to either intensify their locations or find new districts.
Then why don't we just focus this question on the center? Needham Center.
Cause then we get an incomplete answer.
Or maybe, Gene, what if you ranked? Like the first question, if you had a priority for mixed use, would it be in center business, Chestnut or Avery? And we could rank them 1, 2, 3. Maybe that way it would at least give this committee feedback as to where.
Well, I could see removing Chestnut Street. I think it'd be weird to have center business without Avery. Those are two town centers.
I think we can still keep it as a philosophical one, because there are different pathways to this, right? I mean, one is, you could just require it outright, but it is as long as there is a multifamily option, you're compliant with the law, so you can have incentives, they could be mild incentives, they could be strong incentives for multi-use. So, you know, you could add a story or add additional units that are possible or whatever it might be that would tend to steer people in that direction, but still have the multi-family option. So I think the philosophical thing is good, and then we see what we want to do with that information.
As long as I like that idea, as long as we're keeping it philosophical, can we ask about in general, not just those districts, but feelings about mixed use elsewhere?
Is there a particular place you have in mind, or?
Not really, but it is philosophical. If we're adding more density, we need to make it more walkable. We need to allow people to get to commercial businesses without driving.
Okay, so where do we stand then? I'm not sure I understand the consensus. We're doing sort of more of a visioning question. What do we want to see? Are we including all three areas?
Sounds like we are. Are we putting 1, 2, 3? Are we saying the 1, 2, 3, or we decided not to do it?
Ranking?
With the ranking?
Does that make it more complicated? I mean, obviously it makes it more complicated. Does it make it too complicated? Is there a benefit to doing that? I'm not sure that there is.
I thought it.
Yeah, I don't see that.
My own view is this isn't a vote, this is input.
Yeah.
Right.
We just want to say, my
Right,
thought is
and we're not.
a general question.
Yeah.
Would you be offended if there was standalone multifamily in the center business district?
Okay.
Period. I think that's the
So-
question.
So we're gonna ask the question, we're gonna have an any place else line, so that people can have input on other places, but they might. Anything else that we need to include in this question? You got what you need?
Yeah.
And we also would like at the beginning of the presentation, when we show the map, just show where Avery Square is, because there's some people that either just moved here. Or, you know, they don't know the different districts as well as we do, let's say.
So something in addition to the labels that we have on the districts already?
And that might be enough. I
Okay.
just want to make sure that somewhere there's a label.
There are.
So that if they have to go back and think about where's Avery Square again, if
Yes.
you live in another part of town and you never.
Totally. Yeah, there's labels on everything
Okay.
and a legend that lines up with it.
I'm looking back at the housing plan and on Avery Square, and we haven't proposed standalone multifamily in Avery Square.
Not in the housing plan, but one of the options that we've run is basically putting housing, standalone housing in Avery Square.
All right, I guess I didn't realize that. I thought we were only. Yeah, okay. I didn't realize that.
I thought we did it in the 6th option. I'd have to go back and look at the data.
I mean, in any scenario where Avery has ever been discussed, it has to have multifamily, standalone multifamily, otherwise we can't use it as a district, so I just assumed everyone. You know, anything that we're showing has gotta have it, otherwise we can't count it.
Has to allow it, but it doesn't prevent mixed use as an option.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it just has to allow standalone multifamily.
It was already allowed in that district, Gene, so the housing plan didn't need to say that
Standalone multifamily housing is allowed in Avery
it's
Square.
allowed in Avery Square.
I could take off the zoning bylaw and check that, but I'm not going to.
All right.
You don't need to, you have leave.
Well, true enough, true
All
enough.
right, let's
Let's
go on to 5.
Yeah.
I can't trust my own memory, that's for sure.
Okay. Hopefully, question 5 is a little more straightforward. Again, I can shorten it, simplify it, but generally, I want to ask a question about GR. How do people feel about the inclusion of GR? Obviously, right now, it's only in scenario, whatever we're calling it, 3. So just the choice, as I was thinking it, I support including general residents as part of the district. I do not support including it as part of the district. I also wanted to ask a question of like, would they prefer to limit the zoning to 3 units on a parcel instead of 4. Maybe that's too detailed, I don't know, but that is something, we can't go below 3, otherwise it can't count as multifamily, but in the last meeting, we did talk about that option, or I thought maybe people, if they needed more information, that might be useful to know. Like if they don't feel like they can answer the question, or they just need more information.
I think you have to have a short sentence saying that, two-family housing per 10,000 square foot lot would not comply. Because that's why we're talking about 3 or 4,
Sure,
right?
we can add that in the verbal explanation.
Yeah.
This might be one where visual would be good too, even though I don't think Needham has many,
A
if any,
fourplex.
four examples,
Yeah.
but I seem to recall in some of the new materials, because they did a lot of the same kind of thing where they were upping it to 3 and 4 units in a large numbers of areas. And I remember in one of their slide presentations, they had a number of different images of what those look like.
That's a good point. And then question 6 is just the open-ended question. So we have a box at the bottom, people can write them.
Do we have to say that the housing plan envision the inclusion of some general residences?
We don't, but I was just trying to provide a little bit of context, so it's not coming out of nowhere. That this wasn't like it's a home decision, but it has precedent.
Yeah.
In
I
another
think it's
document.
fine. I just wanted to, I'm just trying to figure out how do you make these as succinct as possible, and still convey.
Well, I mean, I think the benefit there is that the housing plan was adopted for,
Right, it was approved.
voted on by, the boards. And,
Oh, no, there's many of the boards, yes.
and
correct.
so there was a lot of public input to that as well, so I think it's worth including.
And then
Oh,
number
yeah.
6 is just additional questions.
Yeah,
I think that sounds good. Yeah.
So what happens if people are done taking the survey before 7:50? Do you just wait till 7:50 or
if they,
for public comments?
oh, yeah, we just have to hang out.
Well, I mean, if we feel like the majority of the group is kind of done, like, because if they're moving along with Eric, most of them will be done at the same time. If they're not moving along with Eric, then they'll either be done early or done.
Yeah.
Oh,
We can
right,
say-
you're guiding through every
Yeah.
question.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would
so-
probably say something like, does anybody need more, or does the majority of people need more time kind of thing, and we'd sort of move through it that way.
How often do these meetings actually appear ahead of schedule?
I anticipate the probability, the
1982.
probability of being ahead of schedule seems kind of low. Well, I think one of two things are gonna happen. Like, either people are gonna get really into the weeds and want to take a long time doing this, or they're gonna get a little restless
Yeah,
and not really know how to answer the questions and want to move on to the one faster.
I think we just have to remember.
but I also think emphasizing the fact that if people feel overwhelmed by it and want to just hear all the info and then they can answer it over the next 6 days, I think
Yeah.
that's a good way
Yeah,
to
that's
steer it, because I
I
can
do think that
understand.
one thing that will be really important though is to get this presentation online as quickly as possible, so that people going to do the survey the next day,
Have access
if
to it.
possible, have access to it, because if they don't have access to it, then.
Yeah. We can do that with IT.
All right, so we've talked about the various maps that we're gonna use. They're gonna be ABC or small, medium, large, but not 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
We've talked about the presentation that we're gonna give. We've talked about the survey questions. And we've addressed somewhat the way we're gonna handle public comments. I think generally a guideline is 3 minutes per speaker tonight. What else do we need to talk about tonight? Anyone have anything else?
I did want to talk about schedule, and that is that the meeting that we have scheduled for immediately after the community meeting, on the 18th, was we had a meeting of this group scheduled for January 25th. And if we want to move it actually till Monday, January 29th. That will allow us to keep the survey open until Wednesday, collect all the data, and then make sure that you have it available. So I think we have a more productive meeting, on the 29th. So I just want to make sure that folks check their calendars and there's not some problem people have with meeting on Monday, January 29th at 7 o'clock the same time.
I can't, I'm killed. Well,
It's 4 o'clock in California. Make a short cut.
I'll be on the phone.
All right, well, you will be missed.
I'll watch the tape. I'll stick around.
How about everyone else? Everyone's good, so we'll have a forum.
Could I ask if it's 6 o'clock start time is? No,
No.
okay.
How about
So
6:30? Maybe 6:30 then? 6:35?
No, 7 is fine, 7 is fine.
We need to negotiate.
I assume this is gonna come out later, right?
All right,
Monday,
try.
right, this time.
Oh, we'll send it out, yeah, we'll send it out.
Okay, so we're on to the 29th and we are off for the 25th, is that what we?
That's correct.
Okay.
So we're changing it
Can't
to.
put it on my calendar.
We will send around a formal, invite, Alex, will,
Right.
to update your calendar.
Did we settle on 6:52? Is that
No, Monday, the 29th, huh?
still the difference?
And it's at 7 still?
And we will email out all the finalized materials to all of you in advance of the, meeting.
Oh,
All right. We don't have. Katie.
I also just want to add just some other engagement. We are working with the Council of Economic Advisors, so that's an appointed committee to the select board that focuses on economic development, to do a listening session with some developers and bankers, some key commercial property owners. Basically the materials for the presentation on the 18th. CEA will have a meeting with those stakeholders. Heidi and Bill will be there for home, but I will send it out to the whole group so you all can be there, just to have a conversation with them about where we're at with home, get their feedback. We'll encourage all of them to participate in the 18th as well, but we thought it'd be an added way to have a real dialogue and discussion kind of in the CEA space, which is what that group's used to anyways. So we'll be able to come back to the meeting on the 29th with what was heard in that meeting. And again, we'll get out the invite to all of you, so you're welcome to attend. And
What's the date again?
I didn't say it, January 23rd at 3 p.m.
3 p.m.
both in this room, and we will set up a Zoom as well. So
Can I ask you a question, Kate?
yes,
Were you able to find out the timeline for when we'll know from departments? Like
Thanks for
capital
reminding me.
information?
yeah. So Lee and Alex set up a staff check-in for us to meet with the departments that we need to know about impacts from, police, fire, DPW. So we'll have an initial conversation before that meeting on the 29th with them. They won't have an analysis on each of the 3 scenarios, so we'll have some sense to report back to you on the 29th of how do they think about how they analyze the impacts. And so we can share that, so you can have that in your decision making. And then we will end up asking of them, kind of more detailed feedback when this group lands on the final preferred scenario, so that, you know, we'll have a better sense.
Thank you.
Did you say that meeting's gonna be at Powers Hall? Where?
The CEA meeting,
Yeah.
it'll be here in this room.
Here.
Yeah.
I just want to mention, we talked about the comments, the free-form question towards the end. They're just gonna provide us with like a big old list of all the comments and consolidate them in any way, so you'll be able to read it for
Okay.
thoughts.
Is there a way to pair the comments with the previous answers? Or are all the comments to that question 6 gonna be separate from the previous answers they had?
Exactly.
We will provide it to Hone as a running list, so you can see all the comments, just because. But in the output for SurveyMonkey, you could look at it, you could cross tab it
Okay.
different ways.
I'm imagining certain cases where it might be helpful to know, but
Yeah, I think a Survey Monkey, we should be able to do the cross tabbing.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not gonna provide that,
I
but
know.
if you want something specific, let me know.
yeah, thank you.
Can you remind me again, the next meeting is the community meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so just to remind everyone that the next meeting is the community meeting, and that's on the, 18th. And then the next one you're saying is on the 23rd to hear, to be a participant or whatever.
The CEA meeting.
The CEA meeting, and then the 25th is the,
29.
sorry, the 29th.
And we have a work meeting. It's on my calendar.
When I joined the planning board, they said it was 2 meetings a month. That's all I have to say, and I said, oh, that seems reasonable. That seems reasonable.
Well, two land board meetings.
Yeah, 2 times,
Yeah, it's like.
there's a multiplier there that they forgot to tell me.
All right, anything else from anyone else? If not, I would welcome a motion.
So move to adjourn.
Second.
Excellent. We'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Kevin Keen, Dean,
Aye.
Yes.
Bill.
Aye.
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 We are adjourned. Well done, Rick.
Thank you.